Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Charlene Aaron. Today, pushing Hamas closer to collapse. That's the word from the Israeli Defense Forces as a new humanitarian aid program is breaking the power of Hamas over the people of Gaza as Israel keeps up its military offensive against the terrorist group. Here at home, the legal fight over a new Colorado law over transgender pronouns versus free speech. And former Trump administration cost-cutter Elon Musk blasts the budget and tax cut bill from the Republican Congress and White House, calling it, quote, an abomination. We'll look at the battle over the bill on Capitol Hill. And on the lighter side, a unique combination of two styles of cuisine, soul food with an international flair. Those stories and more today on NewsWatch.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
And we begin in the Middle East, where Hamas is facing major threats, not only from Israel's military offensive, but from the new humanitarian aid program in Gaza. In just over a week, the new plan has distributed millions of meals to hungry Gazans, and it's weakening the power Hamas has held over Palestinians in Gaza. Chris Mitchell brings us the story from Jerusalem.
On Tuesday, IDF spokesman Brigadier General Effie Dufresne said Hamas is steadily losing control over Gaza and its people. Dufresne also released a map showing how the IDF is controlling more ground in Gaza.
We are delivering major setbacks to Hamas and pushing the terrorist organization closer to collapse. As a result of our military operations and the pressure we are applying, Hamas is losing its grip on the population in Gaza and its control over humanitarian aid.
The new distribution centers run by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, or GHF, provide aid directly to Gazans, bypassing Hamas, who has systematically stolen, hoarded, and sold international aid throughout the war.
This initiative is proving effective. Gazan residents are coming to the distribution centers to receive the aid. The civilian population of Gaza understands that Hamas is not taking care of them. On the contrary, Hamas is actively trying to prevent them from receiving the aid.
Gaza is an active war zone. It is deadly, it is unpredictable, it's unstable. But amidst the chaos, people are hungry and someone has to feed them. And that's what the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation aims to do.
On Tuesday, the GHF announced Reverend Johnnie Moore is taking over as its new executive chairman.
Our technical experts have built a secure and scalable model that works inside an active war. It's not just remarkable, it's proof that humanitarian delivery doesn't need to be slow, it doesn't have to be dangerous, and it doesn't have to be politicized. And it can be done without trucks being seized, without mass diversions of aid, and with as much security as is possible in an active war zone.
Over the weekend, international media reported the IDF killed dozens of Gazans coming to receive aid at the GHF distribution centers. Those reports turned out to be false, leading one news outlet, the Washington Post, to retract its story. The White House criticized media coverage of Israel, specifically calling out the BBC.
Who had multiple headlines. They wrote, Israeli tank kills 26, Israeli tank kills 21, Israeli gunfire kills 31, Red Cross says 21 people were killed in an aid incident, and then, oh wait, they had to correct and take down their entire story, saying we reviewed the footage and couldn't find any evidence of anything. Oh. Okay, so we're going to look into reports before we confirm them from this podium.
For the first time in more than a year, terror groups in Syria fired 2 rockets into Israel. The IDF responded with a series of airstrikes saying, quote, the Syrian regime is responsible for what is happening in Syria and will continue to bear the consequences as long as hostile activity continues from its territory. On the Iranian front, Ayatollah Khamenei rejected the latest U.S. proposal and insisted Iran would not abandon its uranium enrichment program.
Chris Mitchell is with us now from Jerusalem. Chris, we'll talk more about Iran in a moment, but let's talk about Hamas first. What are some of the signs showing that Hamas is losing control?
Well, Charlene, just in the last couple of days, it's kind of actually been a major sign. There's a clan in the southern Gaza led by a man named Yasser Abu Shabab. And he made a historic declaration, judging from what's happening in Gaza, where major families and clans in southern Gaza, for the first time, they're saying to Hamas, enough is enough. Hamas has brought only blood and ruin, and it no longer represents us. And they hold Hamas responsible for what the devastation in Gaza, and they demand an immediate end to Hamas rule. And they call what they're calling for a national Palestinian conference to form new leadership. And so what this means, Charlene, is not only do you have Hamas being defeated militarily and more land being taken over by the IDF, but you have this new humanitarian aid bypassing Hamas and taking away what they have sold for funds and what they have used to control the population. So it's really a major sign that maybe Hamas has its back to the wall, and maybe in the future, in perhaps the near future, just represents serious threats to the rule of Hamas in the Gaza Strip.
Well, Chris, we know that the IDF also mentioned Israel's military offensive against Hamas. How much progress is Israel making?
They're making a lot of progress right now, Charlene. Right now, apparently, they have 46%, just under 50% of control of the land of Gaza. What their plans are with this new offensive called Gideon's Chariots that started just a couple of weeks ago, they want to control 75% of the Gaza Strip in the next 2 months. In the meantime, they're destroying infrastructure, tunnel systems, and then buildings used by Hamas. And so they want to shrink Hamas territory more and more. The whole idea is to free the hostages eventually and defeat Hamas. They have 5 divisions acting right now inside Gaza, moving throughout the Gaza Strip, north to south, east to west.
Well, we saw in your report, Chris, that the White House called out the media for its coverage of Israeli forces and what's happened around this aid distribution. Is the Israeli government also taking on the media for its false reports?
Well, the IDF certainly is, called out the media, and according to their initial findings, the IDF did not fire at the civilians within those aid distribution centers. And then, despite the fact that the BBC, CNN, Washington Post, they had to retract all those stories. The IDF said any claims that they were firing on those Gazans that came to those distribution centers were false. And what that does, according to the IDF, it really harms the IDF, and it really serves Hamas propaganda and accuses Hamas of just spreading false information, which is, unfortunately, according to the IDF, echoed by the international media without any verification. And, Charlene, it's really been a problem, I think, for the international media since the very beginning of the war, when they're parroting many of the figures that come out from the Hamas Ministry of Health or the Ministry of Information, and just parroting those numbers, which often find out to be untrue. Former Israeli Ambassador Michael Oren has written an article about this, and he just says, really, this is complicit many times in fueling the kind of anti-Semitism we've seen recently in Washington with that Jewish couple that were murdered, and then in Boulder, Colorado, just a few days ago.
Absolutely. Well, Chris, getting back to Iran, what do the Iranian Supreme Leader's rejection of the latest U.S. proposal do to the nuclear negotiations there?
Well, Charlene, it makes you wonder, where do we go from here? This is not just the negotiators saying they're not going to stop enriching uranium. It's the Supreme Leader. So you have 2 diametrically opposed positions, the White House and the U.S. administration saying no enrichment at all for Iran, and you can't stop. But on the other hand, you have the Supreme Leader saying we won't stop enrichment. So how will the White House respond to the Supreme Leader? It remains to be seen. Over here in Israel, they really don't trust Iran, that they violate their agreements. And so it looks like we might be on the cusp of some sort of military action. But we've been wondering about that for weeks now. But we'll see what happens and what kind of reaction the White House will have to Khamenei's statement.
Last question for you, Chris. What can you tell us about these rocket attacks on Israel from terror groups in Syria? Is that a significant threat?
Well, it could be, and it seems it's very troubling developments what's happening right now, because what's happening is that many of the jihadists that had been part of the takeover of Syria, back in December, are being folded back into the Syrian army. Now, these 2 groups apparently maybe we're committed to the government, maybe not. The government is denying it, but it's a troubling development of what's happening to these jihadist groups that had been part of what was the takeover of the Assad regime back in December.
Our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell, thanks for your insights, and we'll be looking forward to hearing from you again in the days ahead. Well, coming up here at home, a new state law in Colorado says if you don't use the right pronoun for a transgender person, it's a form of discrimination. Critics call the law a threat to free speech, and they're going to court against it. We'll have that story for you when we come back. A federal lawsuit is labeling a new Colorado law protecting transgender rights as unconstitutional. Critics claim the measure violates free speech and could set a national precedent. CBN's Brody Carter has the story.
Colorado's Kelly Loving Act is now a law that declares that using names or pronouns in public settings that don't align with a person's gender identity is a form of discrimination.
The Supreme Court has said the First Amendment protects not just your right to say something, but also your right not to be compelled to say something you don't want to say.
After widespread pushback, lawmakers removed a section that would have treated misgendering as coercive control in child custody cases. With plaintiffs now seeking an injunction, it could become Colorado's third showdown before the Supreme Court.
The hubris of the state of Colorado to believe that it can put its thumb on the scale of free speech is really an exercise in the kind of narcissism that we're seeing out of these blue states.
Groups including Defending Education, Protect Kids Colorado, and Do No Harm are part of the federal lawsuit challenging the law which Governor Jared Polis signed on May 16th.
In particular, Colorado is a historic bad actor when it comes to anti-discrimination law. It has a tendency to target objectors to sort of progressive ideologies.
Sarah Parshall-Perry, a senior legal fellow with Defending Education, sees this case possibly setting a national benchmark, especially if other states follow the Colorado model.
I am hopeful that if the Supreme Court does eventually get a chance to weigh in on this case, that they will clarify that the state of Colorado has expressed religious animus.
Polis, the nation's first openly gay governor, said he was not comfortable with earlier drafts and praised the final bill as a fair compromise. Brody Carter, CBN News.
Turning now to Washington, Elon Musk, who led the budget-cutting efforts in the Trump administration earlier this year, is blasting President Trump's so-called Big Beautiful Bill on spending and taxes, posting on X, this massive, outrageous, pork-filled congressional spending bill is a disgusting abomination, and shame on those who voted for it. You know you did wrong. You know it. But the White House defended the bill, which has passed the House. Now the Senate will take it up, with some senators promising to make changes. Capitol Hill correspondent Michelle London brings us that story.
The sweeping plan goes to the Senate for the reconciliation process, and that would allow Senate Republicans to pass legislation with a simple majority. Still, Majority Leader John Thune can only afford to lose 3 votes.
The bill is passed.
Even as a handful of Senate Republicans are signaling changes for the House-passed mega bill, Speaker Mike Johnson is encouraging his colleagues to be careful.
This is the biggest spending cut, I think, in the history of government on planet Earth. Now, is it enough? Of course not. But we have a very delicate balance, and we have to start the process.
Its core components include permanently extending Trump's 2017 tax cuts, increasing military spending, and $50 billion towards southern border wall construction. It would also remove taxes on tips and overtime pay while increasing child tax credits from $2,000 to $2,500.
Some senators, Senator Hawley out of Missouri, would like to see that much higher.
Dr. Jared Pinson, associate economics professor at Cedarville University, sees part of this bill representing growth.
We were coming into next year with what would have been the largest tax increase in U.S. history if Congress had done nothing.
Even as the Congressional Budget Office estimates national debt growing by $3.8 trillion over the next decade. Calculations just don't add up for fiscal hawks like Senators Ron Johnson and Rand Paul.
I just can't support something that actually increases the deficit.
So I've told them if they strip out the debt ceiling, I'll consider
even with the imperfections, voting for the rest of the bill.
Still, with virtually no support from Democrats, and in order to keep spending cuts, Dr. Pinson says higher debt is necessary for Republicans to move this bill ahead.
They are not eligible, so they will be coming off.
Meanwhile, Senator Johnnie Ernst recently defended the bill's cuts to Medicaid and food assistance. And Senator Josh Hawley agrees with considering Medicaid cuts, which could leave an estimated 8 million Americans without coverage.
The Senate can't do anything dramatically different than what the House did, because then it would push that timeline out.
As for next steps, Senate Republicans will meet today about plans for moving the bill forward. Whip John Barrasso told reporters each Republican will be here in force at today's conference. They're expected to quiz committee chairs about their input on forthcoming pieces of this mega bill. Plus, they'll cover unresolved issues like the national debt ceiling and Medicaid cuts. While there could be a few more weeks of negotiations, Congress faces a tough deadline to get this on the president's desk by July 4th. Michelle London, CBN News, Washington.
Still ahead, switching to an entirely different subject, cuisine. We'll hear about bringing together two very different styles of food in one mixture when we come back. Welcome back to CBN NewsWatch. Chef Deborah VanTrece is the host of Global Soul Kitchen, and she's fusing soul food with an international flair. She spoke to Ephraim Graham about her culinary food journey.
This is going to be delish. I am Deborah VanTrece, a chef from Atlanta, Georgia.
Which came first, the love of food or the love of travel?
The love of food. That's an easy one. Yes. Through my travels, I've gotten the opportunity to experiment and try so many different cuisines. The travel came as a result of, growing up in a city that I felt like I outgrew, and I wanted to get up out of there. Bam! All cultures have comfort food. All cultures have soul food.
So we're now in season 2 of Global Soul Kitchen.
Yes.
What gave birth to this idea?
I wrote a cookbook during COVID. I wrote the cookbook prior to COVID, and it was released right in the midst of COVID. So as opposed to doing a book tour, I had to do a virtual book tour. One of the people who was hosting me was Rachel Ray. And after our conversation, Miss Rachel said to me, "You need a show." About 2-3 years later, they called me and said, "Okay, we're ready to film. When are you going to be ready to come?"
Love it. So how would you describe season 2?
Season 2 is a little bit more exciting. A Southern twist on a global dish. I'm taking you to a few more destinations. We're going to Jamaica, we're going to South America in terms of the culinary recipes that I'm presenting. We're going to India, we're doing Germany. This one I really sat and thought about, what do I want the people to see? Where do I want to take them?
Where does this come from for you, merging soul food, especially with all these other cultures?
Meat pies were actually dishes that were served to royalty.
What's happening in that brain of yours to make this all come together?
Going into other countries and experiencing their markets, their grocery stores, their cuisine, I realized that the food that I grew up with that thought it was just soul food, it was just African-American cuisine, this is what we eat, other people eat other things, and I saw that was not true. And that started me on a journey where, I wanted to experience more. I wanted to see, the different ways of cooking the ingredients that I grew up with. And from that, I started combining, what I grew up with the things I'd seen, the things I'd tried, the things that I'd eaten. And it was, somewhat of my way of showing even my own family, my mom, she never made it to China. Well, let me bring China to you, Mom, and let me bring it to you in a way you'll understand it. So, that's where the mashup began.
Why do we have this relationship with food? I never thought we'd be watching 24 hours of food. Why do we love it so much?
It brings people together. I think they're very comforting. They definitely remind me of home. We celebrate with it. We grieve with it. Just the feelings that it gives you and the way that it just brings us together is something that, it happens with all types of cuisine, no matter where you're at.
I need that soul food cookbook that she has. Well, season 2 of Global Soul Kitchens available now on the FYI network. And join us tonight for an all-new edition of Studio 5. We will have first looks at several films hitting theaters soon. They include The Life of Chuck and the reimagined live-action film Lilo and Stitch. You can catch Studio 5 tonight on the CBN News channel at 8 p.m. Eastern. You can also watch it on the YouTube News, CBN News app on YouTube. Coming up, it's not too late to start exercising, and we'll bring you a great example from someone who's still going strong in her 90s. That's when we come back. In case you think you're too old to start exercising, think again. Meet Djurdja Vukovic. She is 95 years old, and she is a fitness coach in Croatia. Twice a week, she guides elderly women through a series of stretches, light aerobics, and more. She began exercising in 1964 and has no plans to slow down. Experts say even if you plan to begin exercising, start slowly and stay consistent. Well, that is going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Remember, you can find more of our news programs on the CBN News channel anytime or online with cbnnews.com. Also, tell us what you think about the stories you've seen today by emailing newswatch@cbn.com or talk to us on Facebook, Instagram, and X, which is formerly known as Twitter. We hope you'll join us next time. Have a great day, everybody. God bless you.